Last week, we put out a video titled Mini Workstation, or Building a Mini Workstation. It was a video where we used a Raspberry Pi to build a sort of mini workstation by streaming from one computer to a Raspberry Pi using Steam Link. And what you guys may not have known about that video is I edited that video on the Raspberry Pi. So this is the story of editing a video off a Raspberry Pi. Enjoy. To start, I'm gonna be completely real. This wasn't the hardest thing in the world, the hardest challenge I've given myself, minus one thing. You see, that video was the first one that I decided to use dual cameras and dual audio sources. Currently, my setup is actually grown in sophistication. I've got a boom arm connected to a shotgun mic, which is up here, out of frame, and a lavalier microphone. And that is so that I can get really, really clear audio and mitigate how much the HVAC actually affects things. And so I've been focusing a lot on that. And unfortunately, because it was both the first video that I did that and because I edited it on a Raspberry Pi, we ran into some challenges. So to start off, let's walk you through the process here. We set up our Raspberry Pi using the Steam Link software, and it's running native Raspberry. Essentially, Raspberry is super easy to install. You literally go to the Raspberry Pi website. They give you links to download everything. I am going to link them down below in case you want to set yours up like this. Once you get Raspberry installed, which is a fairly quick affair, you just gotta get the Steam Link app, which is completely free because it's Steam and it requires Linux terminals. So it's sudo git app Steam Link something. Personally, I'm just gonna throw it up on the screen and include it in the description because there's no way I'm going to remember that off the top of my head. Once you get the app and you run the appropriate commands to install it, quite literally just copy, paste, run, copy, paste, run. Once you get that set up, you're ready to go for the most part. You'll notice if you actually launch to your main PC right now, you're going to get the Steam Big Picture mode, and if you try to exit Big Picture mode, you're going to stop streaming. So what you need to do now is you need to, in the settings, go to the little arrow and more settings, and then stream desktop. Click that box, save, exit out of there, and then boom, you are free to exit out of Steam. Don't close it though, because then it will stop streaming, but you can minimize it and you can use your desktop. Once you're there, getting into Premiere, which is what we use to edit, pretty straightforward. We just, click Premiere Pro and go. It opens up just fine, and now we're off to the races. Now here's where I ran into my first real problem. The screen that I used for this project was quite small. The idea was to be somewhat portable, and unfortunately I overshot that. You see, it would have been more appropriate to say that I was editing off of just a really small tablet, to be completely honest. Seeing Premiere Pro in this way definitely wasn't great. And we also ran into a slightly bigger issue. You see, when we're streaming to the Steam Link, it's still trying to run my 1440p monitor through a 1080p signal, which means I couldn't read text to save my life. And if you've ever edited a video, you know you need to actually read quite a lot of text in order to actually get it to work. So that wasn't too hard to do. In fact, I didn't even have to stop streaming. I switched the resolution down to 1080p, and yeah, that fixed that problem pretty easily. Getting everything in there and rendering proxies is the exact same as it was on the desktop, and with actually minimal latency. We actually were running so smooth at this point that I was questioning whether or not this was actually a video worth recording, worth making at this point, because it was just a little too easy. That was until I started to try to edit audio, and I realized that I've never once synchronized two audio sources in Premiere. That being said, Premiere has the best shortcut imaginable for it. You highlight your audio tracks, and then you just click the button that says synchronize. In fact, actually you should do it to your video tracks too, because then it'll sync them all. But essentially you just synchronize your audio and your video and it's a one button press affair, which saved me a lot of time because anytime that I've ever had to synchronize audio in the past, I've had to do it manually, and that is a process. So once we got the audio synced and the video synced, it was a matter of just, you know, editing. Or it would be if it weren't for the fact that the Raspberry Pi's audio chip is so horrendously bad. It sounded bad, even through the Razer Krakens that I generally use for editing purposes. Now, unfortunately, I didn't think to do it, but if I used my Kraken USBs, I probably could have bypassed this problem. But I used my standard Krakens instead, and well, let's just say it did not sound great. Because of that, I ended up actually mixing the video too low, and it's something that I noticed on my third or fourth time viewing it off of the system that I had built to edit it. So that was a problem, but the rest of the edit really wasn't that bad of a deal, except for the fact that I was literally sitting at the same table that I record at, which is kind of a problem because that's a bench seat with no back. You see, I took for granted the fact that I have a really nice chair to edit with. I have a really nice setup over here that is really comfortable and doesn't cause back pain. Editing on that bench did. I actually had back pain for the first time in, well, months. It hasn't been a year yet, but it's been months since I've had a chair crappy enough that it caused that much pain. So unfortunately, it wasn't the best setup in the world for editing. Then came an even bigger problem: color correction. Color science is not something that is really all that easy to get. And I had to use the rudimentary scope to kind of figure it out. And I did a pretty good job entirely based off of memory and where things should kind of be in the scope, which is weird because I actually didn't even know how to use that tool at all a month ago. I actually only recently picked it up because I noticed that professionals include it in their workflow, and I wondered why, and then, well, now I see why. Because you don't need a color accurate monitor if you know what those waves are supposed to look like. Because it ended up coming out pretty good, all things considered. That being said, there were some minor hiccups here and there with the actual edit, and there was kind of a big flaw that I didn't even notice until after it was rendered and set to go. And the only reason that I'm even mentioning it here is because I left it in order to explain it here. You see, at some point in the video, I say, I'm gonna show you what you need for this. And I didn't. I completely cut that part of the video out on accident. I actually had it completely edited, set to go, and I somehow deleted it at some point and never added it back. That's a big mistake to make, and I only made it because I had such a tiny screen and such horrible audio and kind of an uncomfortable situation that I really did not want to try to fix it at that point. So it wasn't the best, but it also wasn't the worst editing experience. And so in all honesty, I actually kind of have to give it a thumbs up for being an actually semi-decent editing system. But I think we can take it a step further. In fact, we are going to take it a step further once a couple of things arrive. You see, I actually have a case from Cooler Master arriving for the Raspberry Pi that I'm going to be using in a V2 of this, and it's actually going to be titled the Ultimate Mini Workstation, using the exact same technology, the exact same Pi, a specialized Cooler Master passively cooled aluminum case, a monitor, not that IPS garbage. I might even use one of these back here, if depending on the timeline, because I do want to replace one of them with a high refresh rate display. But so depending on the timeline, we'll be replacing the little tiny screen with a much bigger screen. Maybe some sort of a stand that is on wheels so that we can move it around. And yeah, we're gonna have a good time with it because I really want to get it so that I can roll it into the bedroom in like the most ridiculous way possible, and edit a video off of it, because it sounds so much more comfortable and a lot more fun if I can lay down and edit a video. That being said, there is actually a practical reason to build something like this. In fact, that practical reason is actually a home server. We're currently in the process of assembling essentially a storage server for our projects. I currently have filled up my 4 terabyte drive with footage. And unfortunately, a lot of it's raw, so I can actually probably get rid of a lot of those raws and keep the rendered products. That way I can clear more space until I'm done with it. But the idea is that I'm actually going to have some sort of a server that is able to store footage. I'm able to pull footage off of it, and it's able to store other projects on it and connect out to some of our peers. So essentially, like, we're creating this server, but in order to actually access it, I intend to use the Pi. And there's actually a pretty good reason for that. You see, I actually don't have enough space to put another desk with another computer on it, but I do have enough space for a computer next to the router. And that's the idea, is we're gonna actually put that computer right there at the other router. And then from there, we're going to have the Pi to essentially access it whenever we need to do maintenance or to control it. That being said, I don't know how well that's going to work, since I actually intend to use Unraid so that I can have access to both Windows and a storage server. So we'll find out. Either way, there is a practical use, and we do intend to actually use that practical use at some point on this channel. So there's a bit of content coming around on this Pi. I hope you actually enjoyed that little story and that little narrative about editing on the Raspberry Pi. I actually did shoot the entire 4-hour editing process. Yeah, it was 4 hours. I checked with these cameras. And to be completely honest, like, as I said, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I could actually see, if you got access to a touch screen, where you could use it for Photoshop, that's actually a lot better than if you were to use it for Premiere. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I just really wanted to do this behind the scenes for you guys to actually see what we do behind the scenes in order to actually make some of these videos. And honestly, this one was kind of cool because it was like a story, a journey through what would otherwise be a completely mundane process that I kind of held my own hands behind my back. So yeah, thank you guys again. Wolfie, out.